My husband grabbed my wrist and hissed, "Never go near that house. Ever." That was the first rule of my marriage. I remember the way his fingers dug into my skin. Not loving, not gentle. It was a warning, one that left a faint red mark on my wrist and a permanent scar in my heart. From that moment on, I knew there was a part of him I would never be allowed to touch. On the surface, our life looked enviable. A beautiful suburban home, 2 cars in the driveway, vacations that made the neighbors envious. But behind every luxury was his control. He decided what I wore, how much money I could spend, and where I could go. Even when I laughed at dinner parties, I always felt the invisible leash around my neck. And then there was that house. A plain gray building on the edge of town. It didn't look like much, just another rental property, he told me. But the way he guarded it, like a dragon sitting on treasure, made it feel more than that. One night, over dinner, I asked casually, "Why do you go there so often? It's not rented, is it?" His eyes narrowed. He set down his fork with a sharp clink. "Don't you trust me?" I forced a smile, though my throat tightened. "I just want to understand why." The silence stretched. Finally, he leaned back and gave a slow, cold smile. "Some things are mine. That house is one of them. You don't need to understand." I swallowed my questions, but the doubt had already rooted itself inside me. Neighbors whispered when they saw me at the grocery store. One leaned in once, lowering her voice. "Saw your husband again last night. Parked outside that old house of his. He stays late, doesn't he?" I laughed it off, pretending not to care. But inside, my stomach knotted. He said he was working late. He said the house was empty. So why were there lights on until midnight? Why did he come home smelling faintly of perfume I didn't wear? Bills began appearing too. Odd expenses I didn't recognize. Designer shoes, restaurant tabs, hotel charges in our own city. When I confronted him about one, he snapped, "Don't snoop through my papers." The wall between us grew higher each day. I longed to feel like a wife, a partner, someone he trusted. Instead, I felt like an outsider in my own marriage, shut out from a secret that consumed him. One evening, I decided to push just a little harder. "Maybe we should rent out that house, earn something from it," I suggested, keeping my tone light. He slammed his hand on the table so hard my fork rattled. "Drop it. I said you will never step foot in there." I froze, my appetite gone. His voice wasn't just stern. It was dangerous. From then on, he kept the keys close, jangling them in his pocket like a reminder of what I was denied. Every time he left late at night, I watched from the window, my chest aching with unanswered questions. I told myself not to imagine things. Maybe it was just storage, maybe it was debt, maybe I didn't want to know the truth. But the doubts became heavier than the silence. I began to watch him more closely, memorizing his routines. He always locked his briefcase. He always checked his pockets before leaving home. He never let me touch his coat. One afternoon, he came home earlier than usual. His face was pale, sweat on his forehead. He muttered something about a sudden business trip, tossed a few shirts into a bag, and rushed toward the door. I followed him down the hall, my heart racing. "Where are you going? What happened?" He turned sharply. "Don't question me. I'll be gone a few days. Just stay out of trouble." His voice cut like a blade. He slammed the door behind him. I stood there trembling when I heard it, the faint metallic clink against the hardwood floor. I looked down. A small silver key lay inches from my foot. His precious key, the one he never let out of his sight. I bent down slowly, my fingers brushing against the cool metal. It was heavier than I expected, like it carried the weight of every secret he had kept from me. I held it tight in my palm, my breath shallow. For the first time, the lock that had caged me for years had a weakness, and I knew sooner or later I would use it. The key burned in my palm, daring me to open what had been locked for years. For 2 nights, I kept it hidden under my pillow, my mind restless with questions. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that gray house standing alone at the edge of town, its windows like blank eyes staring back at me. Finally, I couldn't stand it any longer. One morning, I drove there alone. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. From the outside, the place looked ordinary. 2 stories, clean siding, shutters painted dark green. Not abandoned, not neglected, Too well kept for a house that was supposedly empty. The lawn was trimmed, the mailbox empty. Someone had been caring for it. I parked a little down the street, hoping no one would notice me. My pulse hammered in my ears as I approached the front door. I slid the key into the lock, and it turned so smoothly it felt like the door had been waiting for me all along. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of lavender, an expensive kind of perfume. My breath caught. The living room was spotless, not dusty like a place left unused. Cushions were plumped, a throw blanket neatly folded on the couch. On the coffee table sat an open magazine, yesterday's date on the cover. I whispered to myself, "Someone lives here." Every step I took felt like a betrayal, though I was the betrayed one. My husband had told me for years that this house was nothing, empty, off limits. Yet here I stood, staring at proof that it was not only lived in, but cared for. I moved into the kitchen. The fridge hummed softly. I pulled it open and froze. Inside were fresh groceries, milk, fruit, even a carton of eggs with today's date stamped on it. I reached out, touched the cold carton, and felt rage rising in my chest. He had a second life here, a life he guarded from me. I snapped open my phone and began taking pictures. The kitchen, the fridge, the living room. Evidence. Upstairs, I found a neatly made bed covered in silk sheets, nothing like the plain cotton we used at home. A vanity table stood against the wall, littered with high-end makeup and perfume bottles. My throat tightened as I picked up a lipstick, its cap still warm, as if it had just been used. The scent of perfume clung to the air. It wasn't mine. It had never been mine. That was when I saw the closet. I opened it slowly and nearly dropped my phone. Dresses hung in a row, luxurious shimmering gowns. Shoes lined the floor, delicate and expensive. All women's things, all someone else's. I muttered. So this is where the money went. My husband had always scolded me for wanting small luxuries. He'd said we couldn't afford it, that I was careless with money. Yet here was a wardrobe fit for a queen, bought with the very funds he denied me. I pressed my hand to my chest, the betrayal burning deeper than ever. I took another picture, my hands trembling. I needed proof. Proof of the life he had hidden, proof of the woman he had chosen to keep instead of me. Just then, the sound of a car door slamming outside made me jump. My heart leapt into my throat. I hurried to the window and peeked through the curtain. Across the street, a man stood by his porch, squinting at me. He raised his hand in greeting. I swallowed hard as he called out, "Oh, you're back again?" My knees nearly buckled. He thought I belonged here. I forced a smile, hoping my voice didn't shake. "Just checking on things for my husband," I lied. The neighbor nodded knowingly, like this was normal. Like my husband had been seen here many times. I closed the curtain quickly and leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breath. The anger began to replace the fear. All those years of being told I couldn't be trusted, that I was prying, that I was imagining things. And here was the truth, laid out in silk sheets and perfume bottles. He had mocked my loyalty. He had made me small in my own marriage while building another world just down the road. Tears stung my eyes. But behind them was something stronger. Fury. I began taking more photos, every room, every drawer, every trace of this secret life. I would not be silenced by his lies anymore. But as I clicked one last picture, a sound froze me where I stood. From upstairs came the creak of a floorboard. I stiffened. My breath caught in my throat. The house was supposed to be empty. Then, clear as day, I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving across the ceiling above me. A woman's voice drifted down the staircase. "Is that you, darling?" My heart stopped. I stood frozen in the living room, phone clenched tight in my hand. The perfume in the air suddenly seemed heavier, suffocating, wrapping around me like proof of everything I had feared. I didn't answer. My throat was too dry. My instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet stayed planted. I had to know the truth. The footsteps came closer, slow and casual. And then she appeared at the top of the stairs, a young woman, no more than 30, with perfectly styled hair and a silk robe tied loosely at her waist. She smiled when she saw me. "Oh," she said, tilting her head. "I didn't realize he had asked you to tidy up today." For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. She thought I was the maid. My husband had never allowed me inside this house, but this stranger walked down the steps as if she owned it. I forced myself to nod, lowering my gaze. "Just checking on things for him?" I murmured. Her smile widened. "He's always so thoughtful. Even when he's away, he makes sure everything is perfect for me." I clenched my fists to hide the tremor in my hands. For me. Those words cut like knives. The woman crossed into the kitchen, opening the fridge. She pulled out a bottle of sparkling water, twisted it open, and took a sip as if I wasn't even there. Then she leaned against the counter, her voice airy, smug. "You know, he tells me everything," she said. "He said his wife doesn't understand him, that she clings, but she's really just an obstacle." The word hit me like a slap. My husband had called me, his wife of years. Nothing but an obstacle. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Somehow my voice came out calm. "I see." She didn't notice the storm raging inside me. She twirled her hair and went on, careless. "We've been planning a future together. He promised me, once the divorce goes through, this house will be ours, officially. Then he and I can start a real family. Divorce." My knees nearly gave out, but I steadied myself against the counter. He had been promising her freedom, while chaining me in silence. I asked softly, careful not to reveal too much. "And you've lived here long?" Her laugh was light, almost cruel. 2 years, off and on. He said it was safer to keep me hidden until everything was arranged. But I don't mind. He takes care of me, pays the bills, buys me what I want. Look. She gestured toward the expensive clothes upstairs. He says I deserve it. 2 years. 2 years of lies, of dinners where he sat across from me pretending nothing was wrong. 2 years of denying me little pleasures, while showering her with everything. She must have noticed the tightness in my jaw, because she smirked. "You're very quiet. Don't worry, I won't tell him you snooped. He doesn't like when people poke around his things." I forced a thin smile, even though my stomach churned. "Thank you." Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it and laughed. "It's him again. He can't stand being away from me for long." I turned toward the window, pretending to adjust the curtain, just to hide the tears welling in my eyes. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know she was pouring poison straight into my veins. But I knew. I knew enough, and I had to get out before the mask slipped from my face. I picked up my bag, sliding my phone inside. "I should finish up and head out," I said softly. She waved a hand, already distracted. "Fine. Just make sure the bed is neat. I like it that way when he comes back." I bit down on my lip until it almost bled. I walked to the door, every step heavy with rage. But before I could turn the knob, my phone rang. Loud, shrill, impossible to ignore. I froze. His name flashed across the screen. "My husband," I answered with trembling hands. "Where are you?" he barked, his voice sharp and suspicious. "Tell me right now." And in that moment, standing in the house of his secrets with his mistress just steps away, I realized he already knew something was wrong. My husband died before I could confront him. One heart attack, and all his lies collapsed in silence. The church was packed. Chandeliers cast golden light over black suits and polished shoes. People whispered empty condolences as if they had known him. Colleagues with rehearsed grief, neighbors with polite masks. To them, he was a devoted husband, a generous businessman, a man of stature. But I stood there knowing the truth. Every word spoken about his integrity tasted like ashes in my mouth. I looked at the closed casket, and instead of loss, I felt hollow fury. He had left me with questions, with betrayal etched into every secret wall he built. I wasn't the only one watching the coffin. From the back of the room she stood, his mistress, dressed in black silk, veil covering her smug face, but I recognized her instantly. The perfume that had haunted me was there, clinging to her like a weapon. She waited until the crowd thinned, then approached me with a bitter smile. "He loved me," she whispered, her voice sharp enough to cut. "Not you. That house was ours. You were just the Inconvenience. My fingers curled around the funeral program, crumpling the edge. I forced my voice into icy calm. We'll see what the law says. Her smirk faltered, but she didn't back away. He promised me everything. He was going to leave you. I let the silence stretch until she shifted uneasily. Then I leaned in just enough for her to hear. He's gone now. Promises die with him. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time I saw her fear. The service ended, but my battle had only begun. At home, stacks of unopened mail waited on his desk. I searched through folders, every envelope like a door to another betrayal, and then I found them, documents with his signature, transfers of property, unexplained withdrawals, an insurance policy I had never seen before. The numbers were staggering. He had built an empire in the shadows, keeping it from me, while planning a future with her. Grief twisted into something sharper. I could not let him bury me under his lies. The next morning, I walked into a lawyer's office. The shelves were lined with books, the air heavy with dust and authority. The lawyer, gray-haired and measured, studied the papers I laid before him. These accounts, he said, adjusting his glasses, are in offshore banks, and this property transfer, suspicious. He was hiding assets. If you're his legal wife, much of this should default to you. My chest tightened, a flicker of hope threading through the anger. And the mistress? She claims he left everything to her. The lawyer shook his head. Unless it's stated in his will, she has no claim. Relief threatened to wash over me, but then his expression darkened. However, he said slowly, there's a problem. The will, it's missing. I stared at him. Missing? He nodded. We have records that a will was filed last year, but when I requested the official copy, I was told it's gone, vanished from the archive. And, he tapped one of the files, someone has already tried to claim the estate. The paperwork was submitted yesterday. A chill crawled down my spine. Yesterday. The day of the funeral. My husband was barely in the ground, and already the vultures were tearing at his legacy. The lawyer's gaze was steady. If you want to protect what's yours, you must act quickly. Whoever filed that claim knows exactly what they're doing. I nodded, my grief hardening into resolve. My husband's secrets might have died with him, but I would uncover every piece, drag them into the light, and make sure his lies destroyed no one but those who clung to them. Because now, it wasn't just about betrayal. It was war. The more I dug, the more I realized I hadn't just lost a husband. I'd lost the man I thought I knew. The lawyer's office became my second home. Papers were spread across the mahogany table like puzzle pieces, each one revealing another fracture in my marriage. Offshore accounts, shell companies, property deeds with names I didn't recognize. He had been living as two men, one polished and devoted, the other buried in lies. At the courthouse, clerks whispered as I passed. Everyone had heard about the missing will, about the widow and the mistress both circling the estate. Their glances burned, but I held my head high. I could not afford weakness. Still, every new file I uncovered chipped away at what little remained of my memories of him. The man who had once kissed me goodnight, who had laughed at the dinner table, who had promised me forever, had also signed documents that treated me like nothing. The weight of betrayal pressed harder each day. The mistress didn't make it easier. She appeared outside the courthouse one morning, leaning against a sleek black car, her sunglasses hiding her eyes. "You're wasting your time," she said coolly. "He wanted me to have it all. The lawyers, the courts, they won't change that." I brushed past her, but she caught my arm. For a moment, her voice softened. "We can share. You don't have to ruin me." I turned slowly, meeting her gaze. "You ruined yourself the moment you agreed to his lies." Her mask cracked, bitterness spilling through. "Careful," she hissed. "You think you know everything, but there are things in his past you can't handle. Family shames, secrets that will bury you too." Her words rattled me, but I refused to let her see. I walked away, heart pounding, her warning echoing in my mind. Family shames. What could she know that I didn't? Back at the secret house, the air still reeked of her perfume. I searched deeper this time. Inside closets, behind picture frames, under mattresses. What I found made my stomach twist. Receipts for luxury items but under false names, a briefcase containing mortgage papers I'd never seen, with the house itself listed as collateral for debts tied to shady investors. My husband hadn't just lied. He had gambled our lives on deals so dangerous. They had to be hidden. The walls of the house seemed to whisper his duplicity. I photographed every page, scanned what I could, and sent copies to the lawyer. Then, with shaking hands, I froze the accounts the mistress had been draining. If she thought she could bleed me dry, she would find the well sealed, but each discovery deepened the question. How much deeper did his lies go? The next day, I met the lawyer again. He tapped the new documents with a frown. This paints a troubling picture. He wasn't just hiding assets. He was laundering money. These debts, if creditors come forward, they may not stop at the estate. They could come after you, I inhaled sharply, unless I expose everything first. He nodded slowly. The authorities should be alerted, but tread carefully. If others were involved, they may try to silence you. That night, I returned to the secret house one last time. I needed answers buried in its walls, something beyond numbers and signatures, something human. The mistress's words haunted me. Family shames. In the master bedroom, I knelt by the floorboards near the window. The wood looked slightly different, newer, less worn. My instincts prickled. I pried at the seam with a knife until the board lifted with a creak. Dust rose, and beneath it, a small sealed box rested in the dark cavity. My pulse thundered. The box was old, heavy, locked with a tarnished clasp. I lifted it carefully, brushing away years of grime. Inside, not jewelry, not cash, but letters. Dozens of them, tied in neat bundles, each marked in his handwriting, and on the top envelope, one word that stopped me cold. Confession. The letters smelled of dust and guilt. His handwriting trembled with secrets he never dared to say aloud. I sat alone in the secret house, a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. The night was silent except for the rasp of paper as I untied the bundle. My hands shook, not from fear of ghosts, but from the weight of the man I had once loved, now reduced to ink and shame. The first letter began with my name. Forgive me. I almost laughed. Forgive him? Each word bled excuses. He admitted what I already knew. The money, the debts, the mistress. But then came the line that nearly broke me. I fathered a child. She lives here in secret. I meant to tell you. Someday. The lamp flickered. My breath caught in my throat. A child. The mistress hadn't just been a lover. She was the mother of his hidden family. And this house, this carefully kept prison of lies, had been meant for them. A new beginning that required erasing me. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to keep the pieces of myself from scattering. The next letter was worse. He confessed to making deals with dangerous men, using false names to protect himself, but putting everything else at risk. The debts weren't just numbers. They were chains, ones that could drag me down with him if I didn't act. Finally, at the bottom of one page, his trembling scrawl, "If you find these letters, burn them. Let the lies die with me." I closed my eyes, the paper crumpling in my fist. He wanted me silent, even from the grave. But silence was what had given him power. I whispered into the stillness, my voice firm and steady. You thought you'd bury me with lies, but I'll bury the lies instead. The rest of the night blurred as I read through each confession, each apology stitched with cowardice. He wanted me to protect his image, his empire, his mistress, his child. No. By dawn, I gathered the letters into a box and carried them to the lawyer's office. When he opened the bundle and skimmed the first page, his face paled. "This," he murmured, "this is undeniable. His own admissions. Affairs, hidden accounts, even the child. The court won't ignore this." "Good," I said coldly, "because neither will I." He glanced at me, perhaps searching for sorrow, but found only resolve. "You know this will be public. The mistress will fight harder now. She won't accept this quietly." I leaned forward, my voice low. "She's been living off his lies for years. Now she'll choke on them." The lawyer nodded and began preparing filings. The letters, once his tools of guilt, had become my weapons of liberation. Days later, the court date was set. News spread quickly, too quickly. By the time I returned home that evening, she was waiting at the gate. The mistress stepped out of the shadows, her eyes burning with fury. "No perfume this time, just venom. You think you've won?" she spat, parading his shame in front of everyone, dragging me through the dirt. "You'll regret crossing me." Her words were meant to pierce, but they fell flat. I had already faced the deepest cut, the truth itself. Nothing she could say now could wound me further. I met her glare with calm steel. "The lies end here. Whatever he promised you, it dies with him." She stepped closer, her voice a hiss. "No, this isn't over. The court date will destroy you." I held her gaze unflinching, then let it. "Because I've already buried the man you thought would save you." Her face twisted, with rage before she turned on her heel and disappeared into the night. But her words lingered. The battle was no longer in secret. Was heading straight into the courtroom. She smiled in court like a queen, but I had the crown in my hands, his own words. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and nerves. Rows of spectators leaned forward in silence, hungry for scandal. At the front, the judge presided with a stony face, the kind that revealed nothing, and across from me she sat, draped in black silk, chin high, lips curved in a smile meant to cut. The mistress. She looked as though she had already won, as though the seat beside her were a throne and the entire room her audience. But I had something she didn't. The truth, bound in letters, signed in his own trembling hand. When called forward, I rose with calm steps, though inside my pulse raced. My husband's ghost lingered everywhere, but today he would not haunt me. Today he would condemn himself. The mistress struck first. She took the stand, tears shimmering at will, her voice breaking on cue. "He loved me," she sobbed. "He wanted to leave her. He said I was his real family. I lived in fear for years, waiting for him to finally do what he promised. And now she gestured toward me, trembling. She wants to erase me, erase his child." Gasps rippled through the room. The judge raised a hand for silence. I kept my expression calm, though her performance made bile rise in my throat. Every lie was another stone thrown my way, meant to bury me alive. When my turn came, I stepped forward and placed the letters on the stand. The clerk handed them to the judge, who began to read aloud. The room stilled. I fathered a child. I meant to tell her, "Forgive me, if you find these letters, burn them. Let the lies die with me." Each word, his handwriting undeniable, twisted the air heavier. The mistress's face drained of color. "These documents are clear," the judge said, his voice stern. The deceased admitted his deception. He concealed assets, supported a mistress, and failed to disclose a child. But legally, the estate remains with his wife, unless otherwise dictated in a will. The mistress shot to her feet. "It's not fair. He promised me everything." Her voice cracked into a scream, raw and ugly. I stood, meeting her rage with a calm she couldn't touch. "He promised me a marriage, too. Look how that ended," the courtroom murmured, the sound swelling like a wave. I laid down more evidence. Property transfers, account freezes, testimony from neighbors who had seen her slipping in and out of the house. Piece by piece, I dismantled the fantasy she clung to. The judge banged his gavel once, silencing the room. The court rules in favor of the legal spouse. The estate, assets, and property revert accordingly. The mistress has no lawful claim. It was over. The weight of betrayal lifted, not gone, but shifted. For the first time, I felt air in my lungs again. Vindication. Strength. I left the courthouse surrounded by whispers, but I walked tall. The letters had not destroyed me. They had freed me. She followed. Outside, her face twisted with fury, all elegance gone. The mask had cracked, revealing the venom beneath. "You think you've won?" She spat, voice low, dangerous. "This isn't over. You've humiliated me. I'll make you pay for this." I stopped at the top of the courthouse steps, turned, and faced her squarely. "You lost because you built your life on lies," I said, my voice steady. "But if you want a war, remember I already buried him. I won't hesitate to bury the rest. Her eyes blazed with hatred. She leaned closer, whispering so only I could hear. "You'll regret crossing me." And then she vanished into the crowd. The court had given me justice, but her threat promised something darker. Revenge. I walked through the door of the secret house again. Not as a trespasser, but as its owner. The key turned smoothly in the lock, no longer forbidden, no longer heavy with his control. The house stood quiet, stripped of shadows and whispers. The perfume had faded, the clutter cleared by the officials who inventoried every corner. For years, this place had been a cage of secrets. Now it was mine to reclaim. I set my bag on the table and walked slowly from room to room. The walls felt lighter, the air cleaner, as though even the house itself sighed with relief. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what I might find. This was no longer his shrine. It was my ground. But peace never lasts long. A knock rattled the door, sharp, urgent. I opened it, and there she was, the mistress. Gone was the silk and smugness. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked nothing like the queen who once smiled at me from across the courtroom. "He left me nothing," she blurted before I could speak. Her voice cracked, raw with desperation. "What am I supposed to do?" I studied her. The same woman who had laughed at my pain, who had sat in that courtroom demanding my life be stripped away. Yet now, stripped of his protection, she looked small. "There's a child," she whispered, almost as if confessing. "He is real, and he has nothing now." For a moment, the silence between us was heavier than any words. I thought of the letters, of my husband's cowardly apologies, of how he had hidden behind lies until the day he died. The child was innocent. None of this was his fault. I stepped aside just enough for her to see the house behind me. "This place was built on lies," I said firmly. "I will not let those lies raise him." Her eyes flicked up, hopeful, pleading. "So you'll help us?" "I'll help him," I corrected. "Not you. Not your greed. Raise your child with truth, not lies. That's all you have left." Her lips trembled. She wanted more: money, comfort, status. But she saw in my face that the door was closed on all of it. She shook her head, muttering, "You don't understand." "He promised—" "Enough," I cut in, my voice sharp but steady. "He promised me a marriage too, and look how that ended. I won't carry his lies for you, and I won't let you use that boy as a weapon. If you want him to have a future, give him honesty. That's the only inheritance left." Her shoulders sagged. For the first time, she looked less like an enemy and more like what she truly was, a woman who had gambled on lies and lost. She turned, her figure small against the fading evening light, and walked away without another word. I closed the door slowly, the echo ringing through the house like a final verdict. My hand lingered on the wood, steady, certain. The house was silent again, but no longer suffocating. It belonged to me now, not the me he had tried to silence, but the woman who had walked through betrayal and come out stronger. I whispered into the quiet, my voice carrying through every corner. "This house is mine now, and so is my peace." For the first time in years, I slept without fear of what I didn't know. The morning light drifted through the curtains of my own bedroom, the one that had witnessed both my grief and my resilience. No secret houses, no hidden keys, no shadows waiting to pounce, just silence, just peace. I made my coffee slowly, deliberately, savoring the small ritual. The bitterness on my tongue tasted different now, no longer a symbol of loneliness, but of strength. The routine of life was beginning to return, but this time, it was my routine, not one dictated by someone else's deception. The neighbors still whispered. I saw the way their eyes lingered when I stepped outside to tend my garden, the way conversations paused when I passed by. Some pitied me, some judged me, and others I suspected envied the quiet strength I now carried. But I had learned something vital. Whispers only have power if you let them pierce you. His wealth had been uncovered, sorted, divided by law and judgment. What remained for me was enough to live, more than enough, in fact. But staring at the numbers in my account felt hollow. What use was wealth when it was built on lies? So I made a choice. I donated a portion, quietly without announcement, to a women's shelter nearby. Every coin of his deceit became a brick in someone else's foundation, not mine. Watching the receipt print, I felt lighter. Freedom was worth more than any inheritance. The rest, I decided, would rebuild my home. Not with marble floors or gilded furniture. No, that was his taste, not mine. I wanted warmth. I wanted life. So I repainted the living room in soft earth tones, filled the kitchen with herbs and fresh wood shelves, and chose fabrics that reminded me of laughter instead of loneliness. As I hung the last set of curtains, I caught my reflection in the window. My face looked older, yes, lined with years of silence and betrayal, but there was a spark in my eyes I hadn't seen in decades. I whispered to myself, steady and certain, "His lies built walls. My truth tears them down." It became a mantra, echoing in my mind each time I felt the sting of bitterness. With every stroke of paint, every drawer reorganized, every flower planted in the garden, I wasn't just renovating a house. I was rebuilding a life. There were moments, of course, when the past tugged at me. A song on the radio, a scent carried on the wind, the sudden memory of laughter that now felt like fiction. But grief had shifted into something quieter, something less poisonous. The betrayal was part of me, but it no longer defined me. At night, I lit a single candle and sat by the window, watching the world outside. The house no longer felt like a cage, but a sanctuary. The rooms echoed not with secrets, but with possibility. I had thought survival was the goal. But survival is only the beginning. Renewal is the true victory, the world could whisper. The mistress could vanish into her own regrets. The past could haunt in fragments. But none of it had the power to break me anymore. I closed my journal, setting it on the table beside my cooling cup of tea. Tomorrow the work would continue. More curtains to hang, more life to plant, more strength to build. For the first time in years, I looked forward without fear, without weight, without apology. A calm strength filled me, steady as the ground beneath my feet. The doorbell rang, and I smiled, ready to face whatever waited on the other side. If you were in my place, would you have opened that forbidden door? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of truth, betrayal, and justice.